Hello everybody, it's Saturday, June 10th, 2023, and welcome back to the Election Predictions Official YouTube channel, where I talk all things politics and elections. Coming up, I'm going to be taking a deep dive into the 2024 presidential election map, going state by state, offering my own insight, and sharing important trends and data points that will help us all gain a better understanding of the state of play as Democratic President Joe Biden eyes his future Republican opponent. If you're new here, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel down below and hit that notification bell so you never miss another video. The 2024 presidential election cycle is heating up, and I have all kinds of analysis, election nights, and electoral college map predictions, just like this one coming up that you don't want to miss. Now let's get into today's video. On screen now is a map showing which states each party has a better than 95% chance of winning in 2024, with most of them being closer to 99%. For the purposes of this video, I will be using Trump as the presumptive Republican nominee, given that he is the clear favorite to win the 2024 Republican nomination at this point in time. Each of these states voted for Trump or Biden by a margin of at least 15 percentage points in 2020, and there is zero reason to believe that any of them will swing in the opposite direction by more than that margin here in 2024. No state swung by more than 9% in either direction between 2016 and 2020, and those that did by more than 5 points were almost exclusively deep blue states. That does give Joe Biden and the Democrats an advantage coming into the election at 181 electoral votes to Trump and the Republicans 113. In fact, California, Illinois, New York, and New Jersey net Biden 115 electoral votes alone, more than all of these red states combined. Okay, so in total, that leaves 244 electoral votes in the toss-up category. But most of these states that remain uncolored are not true toss-ups, and have a degree of lean toward a respective party and candidate. The states that are likely to vote for Biden, or in other words, have around a 75 to 90% chance of voting blue in 2024, include Colorado, New Mexico, Virginia, and Maine, statewide. These states voted for Biden by 14, 11, 10, and 9 points, respectively. Colorado shifted 9 points towards the Democratic Party between 2016 and 2020, Virginia by 6 points, and New Mexico by 3 points. George Bush in 2004 is the last Republican to win a major statewide election in New Mexico, that meaning a presidential, Senate, or governor race. Virginia Governor Glenn Youngkin, who won in an off year and a heavily favorable environment for Republicans in 2021, is the only major Republican to win in Virginia since 2009. And finally, Cory Gardner's 2014 Senate election was the last and only time a Republican won in Colorado since George Bush in 2004. So while these states cannot quite be placed in the absolutely safe column for Democrats, they won't have to direct as many resources or campaign very hard to score a comfortable victory. On the Republican side, states I would put in the same category are Alaska, Iowa, Ohio, and South Carolina. Alaska has only gone blue once in its history, Lyndon B. Johnson in 1964, but state Democrats have ran several successful statewide elections over the last 2 decades, most recently Mary Peltola's U.S. House victory last November. And Trump's 10-point margin of victory in 2020 was a Republican low since 1968. Moving to the Midwest, Ohio and Iowa can be described as the opposites to Virginia, New Mexico, and Colorado, as they have moved definitively right since the Obama years, and notably voted for Trump by 9 and 8 points in 2016, and then again by the same margins in 2020. It's safe to say that these two Midwestern states are off the target board for Democrats going forward. Gone are the days in which Ohio commanded the attention of the country on election nights. Tim Ryan, who many consider to be the strongest Democratic candidate in the country during the 2022 midterms, and the perfect candidate to flip Ohio's Senate seat, outspent controversial Republican J.D. Vance by $40 million and still lost the state by 6 points, proving that even without Trump's non-college, white working class appeal on the ballot, Ohio definitively leans red. Okay, so that leaves these 11 states, plus the 2nd congressional districts in both Maine and Nebraska, and their cumulative 179 electoral votes as the key states to watch in 2024. Any presidential campaign worth its salt should recognize the importance of these states and disregard the rest unless some landscape-altering event occurs. But even at that point, it would likely indicate a landslide in one direction and not even matter that much anyways. Now, having said that, a winning presidential campaign would go even further to label a few of these states as clearly leaning toward one party or the other. For Biden and the DNC, that list includes Minnesota and New Hampshire, which both swung by 6 points to the left from 2016 to 2020 and gave Biden decisive 7-point victories after Hillary Clinton came within 1.5 points of losing both. We can also label Nebraska's 2nd congressional district in this category, where Biden carried its lone electoral vote by 6 points in 2020. Minnesota was targeted in 2020 by the Trump campaign as a state that could expand their political map after coming so close in 2016. But following the Black Lives Matter protests in Minneapolis, Trump's attempts to court white suburban Minnesotans by using images of rioting and looting in some of his campaign ads ultimately backfired, and Democrats won the state for the 12th consecutive presidential election, which, surprise, surprise, is actually the longest streak in the US today. As for the purple needle in a blue stack, New Hampshire, Clinton famously carried it in 2016 by less than 3,000 votes, which put New Hampshire firmly back in swing state territory. It is by far the most fiscally conservative state in New England, and its population has a strong disdain for taxes, historically giving Republicans an edge in its state office elections. However, like most of the rest of the region, it is very liberal on social issues like abortion and the environment, giving the Democratic Party an edge on the presidential level. Moving on, the states that lean toward Trump and Republicans are Texas, Florida, North Carolina, and Maine's 2nd congressional district. Although it was considered a vulnerable state for Republicans by some pollsters and experts, and as well as a potentially upset victory for Biden due to its recent demographic trends, Trump held Texas with 52.1% of the vote, roughly the same percentage he carried it with in 2016. Joe Biden did, however, improve on Hillary Clinton's 2016 vote share by 3%, giving him the largest percentage in the state by a Democratic presidential candidate since Jimmy Carter carried the state in 1976. Democratic dreams of a blue Texas in the not-so-distant future relied on the assumption that demographic trends and increased turnout would push them over the top in the Lone Star State, especially given Texas consistently ranked close to the bottom of the country in turnout, and in theory, an activated Democratic Latino base would propel them to victory. Of course, that theory took a major hit in 2020 as even with record-breaking turnout among Hispanics in large urban areas, Trump extremely overperformed among Hispanic voters specifically in the Rio Grande Valley, flipping counties that had not voted Republican since the 70s, and including 4 of the 5 metro areas that swung the most toward Trump since 2016. The only county outside of South Texas on that list is Miami-Fort Lauderdale in Florida, which was just one of 5 states in which Trump performed better in 2020 than he did in 2016. His 3.4-point margin was the largest for a presidential candidate in Florida since 2004, and the state voted a whopping 8 points to the right of the country. The main reason for this was, of course, increased support for Trump among Latino voters in the state, specifically Cubans in Miami-Dade County, which Biden carried by just 7 points, significantly less than Clinton's 29-point margin in 2016 and Obama's 24-point margin in 2012. Both Texas and Florida could theoretically still be in play for Democrats in 2024, but these demographic trends are perhaps the most worrying of anywhere in the entire country for their electoral prospects going forward, especially as both states gained electoral votes following the 2020 census and appear likely to make up a higher and higher share of the overall electoral college in the decades ahead. Now, as for the state of North Carolina, which now has 16 electoral votes, it was the only state that Trump won in 2020 while receiving less than 50% of the vote. And it's too big and too competitive for Democrats to write off in a presidential race. Democrat Roy Cooper won the governorship in 2020, but it has now voted Republican in 3 consecutive presidential contests, and in 2 open Senate races in the past 2 years, marking it conclusively as a lean Republican state. That leaves these 6 battleground states as the most likely to play a decisive role in the outcome of the 2024 election. I know I've said it before, and I promise I'm actually going to keep hammering down this point. Some combination of these 6 states will decide the 2024 election. If nothing else, take that away from this video, and know that if you want to get involved with either side's campaign, focus your energy in these states. Taking a step back now, former President Donald Trump and Republicans have a slight advantage in the electoral vote count at 235 to Biden and Democrats' 226. And this is the part of the video where the party's nominees really do start to make a difference. You can make a convincing argument that all of the states which have been designated toward Biden or Trump thus far would remain in that column regardless of the nominee. These 6 states, though, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, were the 6 closest states by margin of victory in 2020, besides North Carolina, and Joe Biden won all of them, just 4 years after Trump carried them all except for Nevada in 2016. Let's start with the 2 big industrial states, Pennsylvania and Michigan, which have moved in tandem with each other in every presidential election since 1988. To be precise, they have both voted Democratic in every election since 1988, except for 2016 when Trump broke the once called Northern Blue Wall. Biden won Michigan in 2020 by 2.8%, and Pennsylvania by 1.2%. Hardly comfortable margins. But Democrats did win big in these 2 states in 2022, significantly outperforming expectations in both governor races, flipping Pennsylvania's Senate seat, and winning several Republican-leaning House races. Suburbs outside of Detroit and Philadelphia once again produced big Democratic margins that buried Trump-endorsed election-denying Republican nominees for governor in both states. Also, erosion in traditionally Republican Western Michigan was another point of concern for the GOP. Following the 2016 election, many pundits believed that Trump's wins were only the beginning of massive Republican gains across the Rust Belt, as they showed remarkable strength among non-college educated white working-class voters. That said, some combination of suburban backlash toward the Roe v. Wade overturn, as well as poor candidate quality, has put a halt and even reversed some of those trends. These factors lead me to label Pennsylvania and Michigan as currently tilting in Biden's direction. Although keep in mind that in terms of confidence, I would say that these classifications fall somewhere between 50 and 60%. So not much better than a coin flip, especially this far out from Election Day with limited polling data available. Meanwhile, Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin were home to bitterly contested statewide races, and mixed results that suggest the states remain as competitive and evenly divided as ever. In the 2020 presidential election, the 4 states were decided by a total of just 77,000 votes between them. That's out of 155 million ballots cast nationwide, less than 0.05%. In Wisconsin, even amid intense economic discontent, Democratic Governor Tony Evers won re-election by about 90,000 votes, roughly triple his margin in 2018 when he unseated Republican incumbent Scott Walker in a much better year for Democrats. And while Republican Senator Ron Johnson won re-election, he survived by only a little over 25,000 votes against an opponent in Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes, who Republicans had considered much too liberal to viably contest the state. Still, demographically, Wisconsin is the whitest and most rural of the big three Rust Belt swing states, and in my opinion, the most likely to break off and be the first to vote for a different presidential candidate than the other three, again since 1988. Nevada, meanwhile, showed signs of continued vulnerability for Democrats in 2022. Republicans flipped the governorship, and I consider it, along with Wisconsin, to be a true 50-50 race come 2024. The remaining two Sunbelt states that flipped between 2016 and 2020, Arizona and Georgia, seem to move in opposite directions. Arizona continued to drift toward the Democrats, at least when presented with Trump-endorsed GOP nominees. Democratic Senator Mark Kelly won re-election over Republican Blake Masters by a resounding 125,000 votes, roughly double the margin of Democrats' breakthrough Senate victory in Arizona in 2018, and far more than Biden's 10,457 vote edge in the state in 2020. And while Democrat Katie Hobbs only won the governor's race by about 17,000 votes over Republican Kari Lake, that represented a huge advance from the Democrats' nearly 340,000 vote loss in the 2018 gubernatorial contest. By contrast, in Georgia, most results suggest a shift back towards the GOP. Governor Brian Kemp's roughly 300,000 vote margin over Democrat Stacey Abrams was nearly 6 times bigger than his 2018 victory over her. Republicans also posted solid victories in all of the major state contests as well, except for the U.S. Senate race, where incumbent Democrat Raphael Warnock defeated Herschel Walker in the runoff election in December. Though it's hard to give Warnock and Democrats much credit going forward in Georgia, given that Walker was an exceptionally weak candidate. So what to do with these 4 states that could reasonably be decided by less than half a percentage point come November of next year? If I were to give you guys my instinctual predictions, I would tilt Arizona and Georgia toward Biden, while giving Nevada and Wisconsin to Trump and Republicans, largely because of demographic trends, and I do believe that if there were indeed a rematch of the 2020 election, or if there was another Republican nominee, Biden would still perform slightly worse than in 2020, where the environment favored him heavily. It's also true that the last 2 incumbent presidents received a lower electoral college count when running for re-election, bucking historical fundamentals. That is all, though, for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please sound off in the comments with your thoughts and objections to this map. Your support, whether it's positive or negative, means everything to me. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video if you did, and subscribe while you're at it. You can check out more content from my channel here, and as always, I'll see you next time. EP out.